Perfect. Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I know it's the last session, and a lot of you have probably flown here from outside and are having the jet lag kind of kick in right now. So I really appreciate you being here. This is a very exciting group that we have, and a very interesting and important topic that we hope to cover in the next few minutes. It's my distinct pleasure to have been invited to moderate today's panel. I'd like to thank the organizers and the U.A.E. Space Agency as well for being our hosts. The panel is called Developing Commercial Space. What will increased, more affordable access to space mean for the sector, and what new opportunities will open up? And will space be effectively commercialized as access expands? Certainly, it's a very multifaceted topic, and one that I think we're really grateful and appreciative to have a panel that could, I think, address those intricacies and speak to the topic from many different perspectives and in respect to the industries and organizations that they represent. It's easy for those familiar with the industry to see the benefits of space exploration, as well as space-based assets that provide terrestrial solutions. It's also easy for everyone, including those non-familiar with the sector, to see how dependent we have become on many of the services that access to space has enabled. The more affordable access becomes, the more innovation follows, and the greater the spillover effect into other industries and the economy as a whole ensues. I'll begin by asking the panelists to introduce themselves rather than me read out part of their bios, and hopefully also introduce what they do and the organizations they represent and the relevance to the topic, hopefully, as well. And I'll then ask a few questions and then hopefully engage the audience in the discussion too. So I'll start on my left with Mr. Mohammed Khan, who is part of Orbital ATK.
Okay. Shukran, Talal. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everyone today. All of us on the panel understand that we're the last panel between you and a meal and a libation, so we look forward to your questions. Colonel retired Mohammed Khan spent 21 years in the United States Air Force, did a variety of things, most of which were in the space domain. At the time when I served at the Pentagon, I was honored to be the Director of Space Operations for the Air Force, so I am very familiar as being the beneficiary of everything we do from space. And so transitioned 6 years ago into industry and now at Orbital ATK. And thank you again.
Absolutely, and since I didn't mention it, Mohammed is the Vice President for Government and Commercial and International Initiatives at Orbital ATK.
Thank you.
Next, we've got Mr. Luigi Pasquali, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Telespazio and the Space Sector Director of Leonardo Finmeccanica. Please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to everyone. First of all, I want to thank you all to be here, but also, or mainly the U.A.E. Space Agency has invited us to this panel. It's a great opportunity. My company, Telespazio, is a company in the group controlled by Leonardo, the former Finmeccanica group. The new name is Leonardo, and Thales. We have actually a business model based on two main branches. One is service provision, satellite telecommunications and Earth observation services and applications. On the other side, we work for system engineering and operations meaning maintenance and operating conditions of systems. Of course, in our group, both Leonardo and Thales, we have other space applications industries like Thales Alenia Space, which is on the manufacturing side. And in my role of Director of Space Sector of Leonardo, I follow, let's say, the coherence of our action in the space field.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Next, we've got Dr. Gerd. Dr. Gruppe is a member of the DLR Executive Board and responsible for the German Space Administration. Dr. Gerd.
Yeah, thank you very much for your kind invitation, and thank you very much to the audience for coming. And I started my career as a mining engineer in northern Germany in the coal mines, and so it's the reason why I look with great interest to the activities of Luxembourg with their activities on space mining. I spent a long time, almost 20 years, in a German Ministry of Economic Affairs in Munich, and I was very early engaged in space things. Today I'm the member of the board of DLR, and they're responsible for all the agency affairs. That means DLR is a big ship. We have a budget of almost 3 billion euros, and we are 8,000 people. But there's a small group of only 250 people in Bonn. It's the former capital of Germany, and the government moved to Berlin, and we, as the agency part, we are still in Bonn. We have a budget of roughly 1.4 billion euros per year, mainly spent via ESA, but also we have a small budget, 270 millions per year for only national projects, and one of the main focuses during the last years is promoting commercial space activities.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Doctor.
Great.
Next, we have Mr. Eric Stallmer. Eric is the president of this Commercial Spaceflight Federation in the U.S. Eric?
Thank you, Talal.
Yep.
And thank you for hosting this panel. For those of you that are citizens here at the U.A.E., you should be extremely proud to know the great work that Talal does at the embassy and in Washington, a real thought leader in our international community there. And
thank you, sir.
We're really blessed to have you there. So thank you, Talal, for that. The Commercial Spaceflight Federation is an organization made up of about 75 different companies and universities and different basically organizations that have a vested interest in the commercial space marketplace. What we do is try to protect and promote the commercial space industry, protect in ways of legislation, regulatory issues that come up with the federal government, and promote and to get the word out. I think we work in one of the best industries in the world, one of the most exciting. I have the kind of privilege to get out there and see all the different innovation and technologies that are taking place with a variety of different companies. Usually, you know, back in these Washington conferences that we have, we're all slaves to using PowerPoint slides, and I'm so tempted to get up there and show, you know, a launch or a re-entry and landing of some of our vehicles or deployments of satellites. But so talking about what we do is kind of like reading about music, but it's still pretty exciting what we're doing. So I like to think that we're the whole ecosystem of the commercial marketplace, representing, as I said, the launch companies, satellite operators, spaceports, infrastructure folks, and folks that are doing deep missions beyond. So it's an exciting time. I think 2017 is going to be extremely exciting for the industry with a lot of breakthroughs and innovation, and 2018 and beyond is going to be even better. Well,
excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eric. And last but not least, we have Mike Gold at the end over there. Mike is serving two roles in one. Mike is the Vice President of Washington Operations and Business Development for Space Systems Loral, SSL. And he's also the chair of ComStack, which is the U.S. Secretary of Transportation's advisory committee, the Commercial Space Transportation Advisory Committee in the U.S. And he's been serving as chair in that organization since 2012. Mike?
Thank you, Talal. I do have two jobs, but not two salaries, so I wish ComStack would pay something. Let me just echo, first of all, Eric's comments about Talal. But when things get really depressing in Washington, I go talk to Talal. He's the only person who makes sense out there. So I appreciate that. I appreciate U.A.E. Space Agency and everyone for hosting this. As Talal described, I work for Space Systems Loral, the world's #1 commercial satellite manufacturer. And we're actually owned by MDA from Canada, who some of you may be familiar with the robotic arm from the International Space Station. And what I find so exciting about this is the combination of commercial satellites with space-based robotics, because that is the future. The days of building a satellite, launching it, and throwing it away 15 years later, caveman, primitive, that's over. We are going to be refueling. We are going to be refurbishing. We are going to be repairing satellites in orbit. Everything we used to do on Earth is going to be done by robotics in orbit. And we're also recycling. Who likes recycling out there in the audience? Where are my recycling bottles fans? There we go. There, Eric does. One of the exciting projects that we're involved with NanoRacks United Launch Alliance is taking the upper stage of a rocket and converting it into a habitat for attachment of the ISS. The upper stage structure is already built. The launch is already taking place. So again, an example of leveraging and utilizing hardware that's already in space. In my ComStack role, I have the pleasure of dealing with many of the companies that Eric has in Commercial Spaceflight Federation, although combined with Lockheed Martin, Orbital ATK, Boeing, and many others. So it's where the big companies meet the small companies, and I just try and keep the peace and stay in the middle. But exciting times on all ends, and I look forward to the conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, everyone. So what I think we can start with is potentially the actual title of the panel discussion, so that we can get that out the way and then dissect it and go into details with other aspects to do with affordable space access. So maybe starting again with Mike, what will increased more affordable space mean to your particular entity? And are you of the opinion that as access expands, space will be effectively commercialized? And what does really commercialized space mean to you and your organization or your respective business? Yeah, let's start with Mike and work our way back.
So, you know, we talk all the times about commercializing space. And I think a lot of that is actually focused on LEO. But if you look up just a little bit at GEO, space is commercialized. Annually, it's hundreds of billions of dollars that go on in GEO. And I think what we need to do to quote unquote commercialize space and what it means to us is to bring more of that into the sphere with robotics, where we can build up that industry where it's not just telecom, it's not just remote sensing, but we open space up to other activities, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's involved with astronauts and tourism, and really create new areas and entities. So I think it's more building upon the commercial market that already exists and making that commercial market better. You know, too often we turn to NASA or government agencies and say, we need your help to commercialize, when we should be looking at how do we leverage the assets and capabilities of that hundreds of billions of dollars that are already commercial in LEO. And that's what we're proud to do at SSL with programs like Psyche, for example, that NASA gave us, where we're going to an asteroid. We're leveraging a commercial bus for that. So I would say rather than commercialization, it's leveraging the commercial capabilities that are out there to provide better, more affordable space products.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would just echo a lot what Mike said. I think the biggest driver is going to be cost. And some of the panels earlier had talked about this with the emergence of reusable launch vehicles. But when you get that cost of access to space down, it's limitless of what we are going to be able to do in space. You're seeing it now of the great scientific research that's going on in the International Space Station, the type of projects they're doing, and these new companies that are emerging to help and facilitate that. You know, one company that comes to mind is Made in Space. And what they're doing, they started off with a 3D printer in space, but what they're really looking at is the larger idea of doing manufacturing in space. And when you can manufacture objects in space, and whether that means a profit down on Earth or whether it means a building block for the next step, I think that's critical to where we're going in space. So I'm pretty excited about what that's going to happen, but it's all going to be driven by the reduction of cost access to space.
Great, thank you. Dr. Gerd?
Yeah. For us, commercialized space means making business without government's money. Normally companies try to sell something to the government or to the agency, but it's not what we like when we speak about commercial space. We want the companies to have business with other companies, or that they address the consumer markets. And that is not quite easy, and most of the companies are not used to it. And so we started a couple of measures to support the companies to step into these really commercial markets. And this is the classical approach of technology transfer. We are quite successful in this field. and we try to support small and medium-sized companies to develop more powerful and more and cheaper products and components for spacecrafts. Then we try to support companies to step into new markets, other markets. We try to bring together people from the space industry with people from other branches like automotive, aeronautics, energy, and so on. And in particular, we try to bring together people from the space industry with the IT industry. That's very different approaches. And what we call mobility, that is aeronautics, cars, and ships, and so on and so on. And then we all try to exploit the big number of good and intelligent and smart ideas to bring them to the market. We try this with idea competitions. We call them Inner Space Masters, and there are some the awarded somebody who has a harnessless satellite, and projects like this is quite interesting. And we try to establish incubators for space, but we have some of them. They're quite successful, but we try to implement these incubators in for instance, an IT environment. Not to let space people try to drive a space business, that IT people try to implement space in their normal business. This is what we try to do. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Mr. Luigi?
In my sector, space is becoming more commercial. My sector, meaning in my visibility, my company is more close to the service and application side, downstream. So space is becoming more commercial just because after years, maybe decades, in which space has been developed mainly pushing technologies. Pushing technologies was definitely had a very important role everywhere, in Europe, in my region particularly, to develop industry, develop competitiveness, making an important role in this, let's say, market niche. Now, we are in a phase in which the development is more downstream. Being more downstream is more close to user needs, is open to a broader broader markets. And also what happens is that in a sort of a virtuous circle, these, let's say, market needs are now, in some extent, forcing new or different models also on the space segments. These affects definitely a more commercial market. Indeed, what we are experiencing both in the US and in Europe, particularly in the US, in what we call a new space, that there is a trend of innovation which goes through, let's say, large number of satellite constellation, which will open both in satellite telecommunication the capability to be connected 100% of people, 100% of the geographies. That's the objective. In Earth observation, to give high revisit, maybe with some compromise in other parameters. All these performances are looking to go to a broader market, to make a more commercial approach, to give opportunity to use space results for a very large market. For industry, this becomes also something which gives the opportunity to invest with models where private money are raised because capex are lower, return on investment are easier. So this is the trend that we are experiencing. And then space is becoming more and more commercial, let's say, in a movement which is maybe in some moment also accelerating, but is something, it's a trend that I suppose will not be stopped. Another, and the last element that I want to recall, mainly for industry, there is a great challenge in this movement, in this trend, because as Dr. Gruppe has mentioned, space industry was traditionally, again, a sort of niche where technology and solutions were space typically solutions. Now, with this movement, there is progressively an interaction, a cross-sector interaction. So space is fusing progressively with information technology, with web architecture, with big data, with cloud. In telecommunication, there is this hybrid solution, space and terrestrial solution for digital divide. So this cross-sector from space is again another trend which push into a more commercial element.
That makes sense, absolutely. Mohammed?
So, I'm in violent agreement with our distinguished panel members. I would add from a more strategic level, because a lot of your comments were from the tactical and what I would term the operational level. If you look at my duty title, government, commercial, and international, really bridging the gaps between a variety of different capabilities and customers as well. From my personal experience, I will tell you that from a government perspective, being able to leverage the heritage of the capabilities that each of our capabilities provide on a variety of domain, whether it's in the LEO, MEO, or GEO, or beyond domains as well, such as the initiatives we have with the United Arab Emirates, with New Hope, the Mars mission, and other initiatives as well. Being able to apply those lessons learned, that heritage, that risk reduction in the government programs that we have, inevitably benefits the clientele, the customers, and the end user. That said, at the same time, we, and I'm sure we'll get to this discussion point, we from the United States, and I'm sure the gentlemen at the end that are also in the United States, we find complexities associated with being able to harvest that heritage and then pass it on to a broader global clientele. So we've got that complexity. We'll see what the next administration promises for increased aperture of opportunities in business, as has been stated before. I will also tell you that when I land in San Francisco and I head down to various areas in the San Jose area, I see any number of venture capital-backed upstarts, new codes that are bringing challenging solutions that are low cost. And for our companies, collectively, the larger companies, you know, the Fortune 200s, we're watching them very carefully, harvesting their lessons learned, because they're driving our price points and our costs and our rates to a place we never thought we'd have to go to. So that ingenuity, that innovation is indeed being inculcated by larger companies and passing that on to our customer base as well. And at the same time, from the international perspective, I've covered the government, some of the commercial and the international. We need to be able to, from a commercial basis, embrace our international partners at the very extreme levels, whether that is bringing their sovereign local content, their hardware, their software, or indeed the most invaluable part of their resources, their human capital, into our factories, into our decision making, so that we don't find ourselves being so myopically focused on being the very best that we are on a daily basis and thinking outside the box to satisfy the needs and the goals of sovereign nations that would be our customers as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And on one of the notes that you made, in case anyone here hasn't heard, there's a new president in the US, a new administration. And I'd like to maybe turn to the US panelists here and ask them their perceptions and viewpoints on what your thoughts are of the effects that this new administration in the United States will have on the global commercial space or satellite market, and if you think there will be a sea state change in the United States garnering an increased or decreased competitive advantage in the market. Maybe we'll start with Eric.
Well, I haven't really seen any impact on any of the changes that he's made in the space industry. He has made a few executive orders that have seemed to have caused quite a fervor in our country. I'm very partial to the space industry, and I think We're all waiting anxiously on the decision who the next NASA administrator is going to be. I think that's critical because I think it's really going to showcase what vision the president has for the future of the space industry and the leadership that's going to take over for that position. I would have hoped that that decision would have been made sooner, but I understand the pace of these things. But I think we do need to take a redirect on what are we doing in space, looking at, for NASA, the $18 billion budget, $19 billion budget that they have, and are they best allocating their funds? Are they maximizing public-private partnerships the best way possible? I know that's going to be a buzzword for them. Are they encouraging government use of commercial services? I know that's always been a trying time. For 12 years, I worked for a company, a software company that made software product, AGI, software products for space situational awareness and things like that. And the resistance that you would get from the government to accessing, utilizing commercial products that were far superior than what the government had. So maybe a streamlining of the acquisition. The one good thing that I have heard, the new administration has said they want to look at a reduction of regulations, and any new regulation has to be met with the elimination of two regulations. So it's a one step forward, two steps back, somewhat theme. And that could be good, because I think we're a little bit over-regulated in some areas, but I think we also need some regulation and oversight in other areas. These are certainly challenging times. There's a lot of discourse going on the direction we're going. If I stay focused on my space lane, I'm going to continue to advocate for greater exploration, greater utilization of commercial, mindfulness of the federal dollars that are being spent, and are they being spent the best way? But high levels of concern, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Mike?
So I'm very encouraged by everything I've seen so far. I don't want to say we're going to make space great again, but we're getting there. As Eric referenced, you almost have to have a little bit of tunnel vision, right? Space is special. A lot of us have different partisan views, different ideas, yet when it comes to space, you can disagree with someone on almost everything else, but I find a lot of commonality when it comes to the space issue. As we look at the Trump administration specifically, I think what you have to go by is the team that he's put into NASA right now. You've got people such as Shanna Dale, who is the former Associate Administrator, Deputy Associate Administrator from FAA, Office of Commercial Space Transportation. Brandon Nadine, who worked for Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who was a strong commercial space advocate. So you see that the team is composed primarily of commercial space people.
Autry.
Greg Autry, huge commercial advocate, again, Silicon Valley folks. So I think what we're going to see is not so much of a change as a quickening of the shift towards commercial space entities, public-private partnerships that were started by the Obama administration. I think where we may see a shift is away from Mars and to the moon. I think that many of the candidates, Congressman Bridenstine, Shanna Dale, who have been discussed as NASA administrator, while supporting a mission to Mars, want to go to the moon first and see it as a necessary first step. So from what I've seen, the administration has good people working the issue. I think we've seen common sense policies. I think the NASA administrator will have a great deal of control over space policy, much more so than previous administrations. So I'm optimistic.
Right. Mohammed, anything to add from your perspective?
If you wouldn't mind, Talal, could you read the last part of that question
The
again?
last part of the question. So, and will there be a sea state change in the United States garnering an increased or decreased competitive advantage in the market?
Increased or decreased competitive advantage for the United States. First of all, let me just characterize by saying, although I had a meeting with the ambassador literally 45 minutes before this panel, I neither propose that I'm speaking on behalf of the U.S. government in any way, shape, or form. I may be able to speak on the immigration piece when I return to the United States on Thursday with my name, so we'll see. But I hope that's not the case, and I don't want to make light of it. But it is an issue that's going on. So notwithstanding the presidential executive orders that have been coming out of the new Trump administration since the ascendancy to the office, I will tell you, as far as a competitive advantage for the United States, if indeed the promises made along the primaries and the campaign trail come true, that it is truly a focus of his administration to open up more opportunities for business. Now, that is both a yin and a yang for the giving and the receiving of opportunities to trade, and indeed to team with our collective partners, in this case with our space partners. We are looking at it, obviously we're looking at the internal NASA opportunities as well, but indeed for a broader international and global marketplace penetration, we're hoping for those things. Personally, from my former instantiation as a part of the government mechanism that is commonly referred to as ITAR, the dirty four-letter word that we all know very well, we look for those processes to be streamlined. We look for more commonsensical approaches from the United States to open up our technologies, and also to have opportunities to, again, from my previous answer, bring in our foreign partners, our coalition partners, our friends, and create creative solutions as an international provider of capabilities. We're also looking at leveraging new and innovative ways to access space. We have to think about the new upstarts that are out, that are providing such key and essential studies into options other than the standard ULA, Elon Musk, and other options that are out there as well. But I think the future is prosperous for all involved, and we'll just have to wait. Inshallah, we'll wait and see.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. And shifting gears a little bit, because I want to try to get into a conversation where we can tackle different parts of commercializing space. And one interesting part is the efforts right now with commercial industry to help commercialize a post-ISS LEO. Dr. Gruppe, you've had many successful missions with the ISS, and we know that 2024, I think it is, when the ISS will be decommissioned. What do you think of the new initiatives to try to take the place from a commercial perspective of low Earth orbit, and how are you contributing to that effort?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know that in Lucerne, in Switzerland, last month, the ESA took the decision to go for 24 with the ISS and spend a lot of money, and we from Germany were quite proud that we could start the process of discussion with spending a lot of money for the ISS. So, but we are one of the main users of the ISS. In Europe, we are the biggest user of ISS. And we had some successes, mainly in the field of basic research. That's when we talk about commercialization, the results of this research activities are not really relevant for commercialization. But your question was another one. What's the time after the ISS? And when I understood the US-American speakers last year, right, the ISS will survive even after 2024, up to 28, I think so. But the question is, what's then? And are initiatives like Bigelow, are there a pattern for future activities? I think in Europe we haven't made up our mind about this, but I can imagine that we from Germany, that we see that's an opportunity, because even if it's cheaper, the ISS is a very expensive laboratory, and the next generation has to be very much tremendously cheaper. Even the access to that means launchers have to be very much cheaper. And then there are other activities like the Dream Chaser, or even ideas from Germany to make something like a model from Bigelow combined with a man-tended free flyer. But in the first way, we would use it like we rent a flat. We rent space on this, and if it's cheap enough, we would go to Bigelow, and if it's not so cheap, we would go to Sierra Nevada, or even if there's a European provider, we would use this. And maybe it's a big chance we can, the provider can specialize their offers to the agencies, maybe for medical research, pharmaceutical research, one is better than the other. So it's a chance of more diversity, and that we can be even the agencies are in a better position. They can choose. They have a chance to choose between the one and the other opportunity. So I think it's very interesting.
Excellent. There are many other initiatives as well in commercialization. We've got reusable launch vehicles. There are people that are looking at asteroid mining. There's, like you mentioned, Bigelow with space habitats that could be utilized in low Earth orbit or in celestial bodies. There are different initiatives by many companies right now that are trying to commercialize space. From the perspective of Comstack, Mike, and Eric on the Commercial Space Federation, you guys represent several different companies in this, in these businesses. What do you think is missing in building that infrastructure for commercialization of space? We have, like I mentioned, some. What do you think is still out there to be developed, where a country like the U.A.E. can get involved, perhaps, and aspire to do something that fills a missing link? Eric, you want to go first?
I would just, one of the things I would add on to our last discussion with the concerns is a quote from the never quoted U.S. President Harding, whose only famous quote was that the business of America is business. And I think with that in mind, I think that's a great segue of where we're going to go forward. And it's going to be a lot of international partnerships. I look at what Moon Express is looking to do. By year's end, they're looking to launch a spacecraft to the moon on a New Zealand rocket, Rocket Labs rocket. I see what Bigelow is trying to do with the habitat and their next generation, the beam, next generation beam. I think there's opportunities there. I'm excited about what Planetary Resources and Deep Space Industries are looking to do with the resource mining. About a year and a half ago, we were very instrumental in passing legislation, helping pass legislation for the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act. And what that did was, in so many different areas, help streamline what commercial companies can do, and with the government regulation and where that should be in place. But the one area that we didn't expect any resistance or discussion was really the asteroid mining aspect of it. And there was a lot of, at first, outcry because I think it was misunderstood. But since then, there's been a lot of discussion and kind of advancement on the idea and where that's going and how they can accelerate that. And I think, globally, and I know Luxembourg has engaged in that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities out there. I think there's a lot of cooperation. I see companies like Sierra Nevada Corporation, which has really availed themselves to many different organizations. I know, I think DLR is partnered with them, and as well as an agreement with the United Nations. So I think it's upbeat. I'm pretty.
Mike, anything to add? Or actually also focus on anything that you think is also missing from that ecosystem?
Yeah. So Eric began by quoting a president. As a baseball fan, let me begin by quoting a baseball player, Yogi Berra, who said it's difficult to make predictions, particularly about the future. So I can't say what's going to happen, but I can tell you one thing. There will not be another government station in LEO. That's over. NASA has been clear. This is all going to the private sector. And I believe that this shift towards commercial opens up incredible opportunities for countries like U.A.E. and many others. ISS partnership, ultimately you're talking about a half dozen countries that are strongly participating. We need to open that up to the entire world and countries that weren't participating like U.A.E. or Brazil, et cetera, before. And it's much easier, and what I commend the U.A.E. to look at, is partnering with the companies that are involved in the NASA programs rather than partnering with NASA. The transaction cost is much lower, the timing can be much quicker, and the price can be much more affordable. There is a race right now to the ISS. Not technological. Rocket science is easy, closing a business case is hard. And the first company that can put up a commercial module on the ISS, and forget getting it to work technically, the first one that can get it to be financially sustainable, that's going to be exciting. And as we discussed, Bigelow is trying to do it. I mentioned, Space Systems Loral, where we're trying to take a converted rocket upper stage to lower the costs. Orbital ATK is involved in what's called the Next Steps program. Lockheed and Boeing, first company to get it to work, is going to be really exciting, and that will set the pace for the future. In terms of what U.A.E. could or should be doing, I also want to mention the importance of the role of government. That while we can talk about commercial, whether it's SpaceX with COTS and getting commercial transportation going, government still has an incredibly important role to play. Government as customer to purchase the services that the private sector develops. Government as catalyst to move that forward. And I'd like to compliment the U.A.E., and I think doing a great job of leveraging that government support to take the private sector in the country to the direction that it needs to go in. I think that's a model that was developing in the U.S., that the U.A.E. is leveraging, and is something that we all need to do. Look at space holistically. Stop trying to say commercial space, science, military. You have to look at it all together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And on that note, I think building human capital is essential to try to have our country be a part of this bigger global space system. Two of you here, well, actually, Space Systems, Lara, you're working as well on the Mars probe to a certain extent. But Luigi and Mohammed, you guys are both working with YASAT on their Aliyah-3 mission. I'd like to hear from your perspectives how that engagement's been going and what your general impressions are of the U.A.E. industry based on that experience. Maybe Luigi, if you can start.
Yeah. Yes, we are working with YASAT on Aliyah-3, and we are working in Brazil because just for you to know that Telespazio is let's say an international footprint. We are mainly present in Europe, Italy, Germany, France, UK, Spain, but also in Latin America, which is very important for us. Brazil is definitely a market where we have developed a quite good level of offering in telecommunication services. And now we are in front of this another change, which goes in the same direction of to make the space more affordable, more accessible, and then consequently more commercial, which is the evolution towards the Ka frequency, which will facilitate the space systems, the satellite use for broadband access, or also having, let's say, a price, a unit cost for the user, which is comparable with other solutions. In Brazil, we have selected to work with YASAT, with a satellite which is going to be launched, because we have started with them discussing specifically this project since the beginning, and we have found, I touched on the second point about the, let's say, the U.A.E. and the YASAT particularly space role. And to be honest, of course, I'm here, so but I'm truly convinced. I'm really impressed about the importance that space has for this country. The role of space agencies is clear, even exposed to exploration, which is something, let's say, even tough to put in place, or at least not certainly the best segment, let's say, to develop, not the easiest. YASAT, we have found a great level of competence and professionalism, and by the way, besides this interaction that we are developing in Brazil, we have also started discussing other possibilities, because with Yasat and with Telespazio, we have both looking to several segments in service provision and also to support both our governments in developing new infrastructure and solutions. And so then we can cooperate in that. It's really a positive relationship that we are pushing to reinforce and to foster.
Great. And the LYA-3 is actually being built in Sterling, Virginia at the Orbital ATK facility. So, Mohammed, from your perspective, what have you encountered in terms of how easy the project management team that we have from Yasat integrated with your team in Virginia?
In a word, it's been seamless. But before I answer that,
Sure.
Mike, there is a commercial business plan that is closed at the ISS, and it's Orbital ATK's Cygnus resupply mission. So, and I invite you to come down. We have one on the floor ready to go. So, with that, it's been seamless. Ever since contract award in 2014 between then Orbital Sciences Corporation, as well as Yasat, and certainly the superb support from the embassy in Talal, as well as the United Arab Emirates Space Agency, we began right off the bat. From the proposal stage, we were looking to infuse and inculcate the sovereign local content of the United Arab Emirates, and just superimpose another country's name in there for the initiatives that need to go forward from this point on. But a supreme example, 14 to 16 completely professional, absolutely motivated individuals have been supporting our team throughout the build phase, throughout the program management phase. They've walked side by side with our engineers and our program management team from day one. We recently have had some, as all satellites do, throughout the production phase. We've had some challenges, and the transparency and the teamed approach towards tackling those challenges have been ever so much rewarding, not only from a technical perspective, but indeed from the most important perspective, and that's the human capital, because far too often we can get into our stovepipes and not think outside the box. It has been, continues to be, and inshallah will be a long and enduring partnership with Yasat and the U.A.E. for further programs to come. But I will tell you, this is also translated into, and if I may real quickly, another program that Orbital ATK, indeed MIT, and Masdar Institute have reached, because I don't care if you're the best chair maker in the world, and I don't believe, Luigi, is this Italian leather? I can't tell. You can be the best producer of chairs or satellites, and at the end of the day, if you're not producing a foundation of your human capital to continue the legacy of that capability, you're lost. And so at Masdar University, we have a master's program with an emphasis in space that we have become accredited. And we will continue to do that. They're building a CubeSat that we will eventually launch on our Cygnus, we believe, launch capability. And so we have seen nothing but superlative results that we hope to keep recapitalizing over and over.
Great. So with that, maybe we can take a couple of questions from the audience. If we have a mic to go around, who's got the mic? The mic's right there. Question, raise your hand. Nobody. Nobody? I can ask my next question then. Regulations. Not boring enough? Okay, regulations then. Let's talk about how the regulatory environment and policy affects what you do in your respective roles. Maybe start with Dr. Gerd.
Yes, I think you can take Luxembourg in Europe as an example, how they created a positive environment for space activities in their country with their space law. And I think most of the politicians are not aware that you define the framework for business with this law. They all think space is something 500 kilometers upstairs, but the business is made on Earth, and if the framework, the conditions are not supporting competitiveness of your own companies, then you can put, with the wrong law, you can kick them out of the business. In Germany, we don't have a space law. It's announced since some years, but I think maybe we'll have election in the end of next year, and I think in the next period we will have a space law, and it will maybe reorganize the agencies, and it will set some conditions for the companies, and I hope they will be the right ones. Yeah,
Definitely. Mike, anything to add?
So as an attorney, I can't shut up when it comes to regulations. And Mohammed mentioned ITAR, right? We used to say second only to gravity, the ITAR has the greatest chance of keeping rockets on the ground. I mean, it has been a continuing issue for the space industry, but one that we've made great progress on. We have a unique system in America where we actually pay for our government to provide ITAR monitoring. So I pay for the Department of State to monitor us. I used to joke with the Russians when we do a Russian launch, you know, the KGB used to spy on you back in the day, but at least they had the good courtesy to do it for free. I pay for my government to monitor us on ITAR. But we've made some great improvements there. I think under the new administration, we will continue to do so. What I'm worried about now is the new technologies, things like satellite servicing, asteroid mining, private sector space stations, and habitats require new laws. And the laws and the regulations always trail the technology. And in the US in particular, we're struggling right now, particularly with Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty, which requires authorization and continuous supervision of your private sector space activities. That's why many nations have implemented space laws. And here I'd like to compliment the U.A.E. on drafting an excellent space law. And here I think you see that countries like the U.A.E. can be more nimble, and I think even more common sense, because you don't have the constituencies that we do when addressing these issues. So I think the U.A.E. and other nations really need to make an effort to make sure that we get the regulations right, that we provide for safety, that we provide for coordination, but at the same time, we don't strangle the industry before it can get going. I'd also like to say we're having a space law and regulation panel tomorrow, which I'm moderating. It's going to be a lot of fun. Everyone needs to show up.
They always say that about space law and the fun of it. I would say there's mixed emotions, and I'll take more of a positive spin on this. I think right now the current Congress, and I would say this in a bipartisan way, is very pro-commercial space. They're trying to be as helpful as they can to foster this young industry. They were very supportive, as I mentioned earlier, about the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act that the President signed in November of 15. The Senate is trying to move forward with a version 2 of that bill, asking us, you know, what did they get right, what can we improve on, and as Mike said, ITAR is always looming over us. The challenge is sometimes there's some dinosaurs out there that kind of want to hold back the reins of what the commercial industry is doing for their own parochial gains, and I'm not just saying companies, but it's you know, legislators that have a vested interest in their southeastern states. That's some of the challenges that we run into. But I think the current majority leader of the House of Representatives, he represents the district in Mojave, California, which is really such a tremendous hotbed of activity for the commercial space industry with the various companies there. So I'm looking forward to this. After we get this NASA authorization bill done, I'm looking forward to working on the version 2 of the Commercial Space Launch Act and helping shape the industry as it grows. What's the appropriate measure of regulation?
Luigi and Mohammed, maybe you could address the same question, but from satellite servicing and the new innovations that you're finding in satellite servicing, and how you think regulations and policy could be more conducive to that aspect, seeing where we are in the technologies that are going in that direction. Luigi?
Yeah, of course, the regulations is essential because, let's say, to better develop satellite services, we have, in some cases, law enforcement. For instance, the use of Galileo, which is the European navigation systems, You know that the service have been launched recently in a way that the constellation has already got a certain, let's say, level of maturity, not completed yet, but a level of maturity which allows to start with some services. But then, to allow the development of applications based on Galileo, we need to have some regulation to support, for instance, the use of that Galileo for air traffic control or for other specific application where, of course, we enter into a number of rules or existing laws or risks or liabilities, number of things, responsibilities, which implies that they have to be regulated. If not, of course, the service development will suffer a lot. And this is just an example, but is in general terms, service development, applications development, that trend that we were describing before, going to a more commercial market because to a broaden market users, definitely have to be supported with some law enforcement, at least for some applications. In Europe, of course, we have a quite complex situation. Nothing wrong. Complex meaning that we are, it's a fact, I mean, it's our history, you know. Then we have European Union, we have ESA, we have the member states where there are agencies, where there is the sovereign interests. So then it's an important, maybe even critical or complex aspect to be controlled, and we are all in dialogue with the institutions to support these regulations.
And Mohammed, as a technology provider for the satellite servicing industry, what do you think?
Well, to Mike and Eric's point, the United States government is in every sense a behemoth. And it is as if someone was standing on the bow of the Titanic saying, I think I see an iceberg, we need to go left, and by the time we've sunk, somebody starts turning the wheel on the Titanic. That said, I think in all cases, international and with the US, the technology is advancing at such a rate that it is incumbent upon us in industry to, as respectfully and diplomatically as possible, to educate the decision makers in these different regimes, whether it be in our case on the Hill, in the departments of defense, state, other departments. That has been one of the challenges that we've had specifically at Orbital ATK, because as many of you know, we are now building the mission extension vehicle, which is an evolution of heritage. Remember I talked about heritage before. Heritage applications we've had in the government domain with NASA and our Cygnus resupply missions. And we are going to GEO, we have a contract with Intelsat, to sustain one of their satellites for 5 years starting in 2019. It's a very simplistic approach towards the capability, cone to capture, where we basically become a jetpack. Obviously, and Mike, I'm sure you could talk for hours on what MDA is working, and indeed what we see in our long-term plans for satellite servicing, of fuel transfer, robotic servicing, unfurling of those things that may not have been unfurled. Indeed, building space stations or space resupply stations at GEO and other domains as well. But as we do that, the complexity of those things have to be resonated with the decision makers, not just from a US perspective, but indeed a global perspective. Because the domain we take action in is a global domain. And so to mirror in the future the processes and the approvals by which we take advantage of opportunities commercially in space are key and essential. For us, it's a very rudimentary approach towards things as simple as proximity operations cameras. And so you wouldn't think of a proximity operations camera as being a remote sensing capability from 22,500 miles. But if it images, by virtue, and Mike, you're the lawyer here, okay? If it images any part of the disk of the Earth, you must apply for a remote sensing license. And so we had to go through that process and, you know, resonate with all of the equities in the US government. And it is what it is, and we accept it, but at the same time, we take upon the onus of educating not only a U.S. constituency, but because we have so much international interest in our specific capability, we have to do that with other governments as well. So it really is up to us, sitting in front of you, all of you, to help shape the dialogue for each of our government entities, so that at the end of the day, we're all successful.
That is absolutely true, that we got a call from NOAA. We had cameras just looking at our spacecraft. The Earth kept photobombing our pictures.
It is what it is. I think
what
we
it
got
is.
one question from the audience over here.
Hi, gentlemen. Hello. It is really an honor to have you here. It's a really exciting day to have one of the top leaders in space speaking today. My name is Abdulaziz Al-Noemi, director of a CubeSat satellite startup in Boston, Analytical Space, student at Harvard Business School. One of the most prominent startups since last year. We won the Platinum Prize in Mass-Chal. The people behind it, the co-founders, are brilliant people from Planetary Resources and NASA. Talal, Kaissi, know them very well. One of the things that, since I joined last year, is not only the technology that the people behind it are really working on. The problem is that I wanted to bring the technology here to the U.A.E. And Michael, you brought an interesting perspective here that the ITAR is a problem. And I would like to bring this business to the U.A.E. I would like to have Emiratis to actually be part of this technology. I'm really facing a big problem here. When I was speaking to my co-founders, we're trying our best to circumvent ITAR. So we had great support recently from one of the companies that Luigi and Mohammed is working with. But the problem is we are still limited to how much we can open to Emiratis and companies here. So the question might be very generic, but how can we fix this? ITAR is really a big problem. It's too generic, it's too broad. This is a startup, this is technology. How can I bring it to the U.A.E. and bring it and have our people to be part of it? Thanks.
It's a very good question, and I definitely deal with that a lot with the Mars probe and other defense-type issues, and it does impact the innovation and startup ecosystem here. Mike, you have a lot of experience with ITAR, so maybe you should address this.
All of this gray hair from the ITAR.
Okay, basically, the question was, the answer was actually, should we just hire the best legal? That's it, to fix this problem.
Yeah, so, let's just go back a step. ITAR was an overreaction, that there was a Chinese launch on Long March, satellite was lost, information allegedly went to the Chinese that shouldn't, and Congress did what Congress does. They overreacted. And look, I am not against export control. There's certainly technologies that should and could be protected. What I'm against is doing surgery with a chainsaw instead of a scalpel. Again, the story I always tell, going back to my Bigelow days, is we had a stand that we put our spacecraft on. Round, 4 legs sticking out, indistinguishable from a metal coffee table. We had to have 2 guards watching that coffee table on a 24/7 basis, and then paid for 2 Department of State workers to watch the guards watching the coffee table. I can only imagine the national security repercussions of that coffee table technology leaking out to the Chinese, to the Iranians, where it could be used to serve coffee, or in a worst case scenario, even tea. And that is the insanity that you're dealing with. Now, I raise that because we fixed that. We filed what was called a commodity jurisdiction request. We said that this is wrong. And ITAR was prohibiting any foreign nationals from, for example, riding in Virgin Galactic, a spacecraft, or going to a private sector habitat. We said, look, how many people here have flown on a 737 or a 747? How many have flown on one, right? How many can build one? Right, there's always one engineer there. Says yes.
Orbital ATK can build parts of it.
Exactly. So the point is, you need to not accept the ITAR. You need to push back. Like any bully, you punch it in the nose and it retreats. And that's exactly what happened when we pushed back. Then the next thing you know, industry got behind us. And do you know who doesn't like the ITAR most of all? The Department of Defense. Because you know whose technology and progress ITAR blunts? America's. And it was hurting our industrial base. So when the Pentagon started to get concerned, that's when Congress really started to listen. And we got the changes that we got in 2013 of the National Defense Authorization Act. And just a couple weeks ago, you know, we got new changes to Category 15 that open up more space systems. But it's still a problem. And what I suggest to you is for the companies that you work with to say, don't accept it, push back when it doesn't make sense. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, when you fight City Hall, you'll win. That I used to say, if you're upset about the ITAR, don't blame the government, look in the mirror. Because industry has not pushed back sufficiently. Now let me also say when it comes to U.A.E., while ITAR can be a drag, it can also be an opportunity. Look for systems and technologies that the U.S. is already bringing in from abroad. I guarantee you, in many instances, we would rather be purchasing from the U.A.E. than from other countries. So my suggestion, fight the ITAR 1, but also get America's export control regime to work for you rather than against you in some specific niche opportunities.
Mohammed, any
Yes.
thoughts as well?
Okay, I've got a quiz for the audience. What's the only thing more powerful than nuclear weapons? Anyone? The answer is money. What's the only thing more powerful than money? Mike?
I mean, I'm an attorney, so I have to say nothing.
Got to be lawyers, okay, at the end of the day. I actually used that when I ran the budget at the Pentagon for all ISR space and nukes, and you're right, Mike. The DoD gets it when we look out at the broader constituency and benefactors of the things we take for granted, quite frankly, technology-wise. In essence, I would just ride his coattails in saying, from a personal experience, right after I retired, I joined a company called Excelis. Okay, and for those that may not know, a builder of premier and exquisite remote sensing capabilities, ISR, predominantly providing to the United States government. But at the time that I retired and joined the team, we were joined with Lockheed Martin in a proposal for Falcon Eye for the United Arab Emirates. And everyone said it can't be done. But with enough shaping of the dialogue, with enough teamed approach from your sovereign territory in the United States, and it has to be a teamed approach, from a sovereign nation to a sovereign nation, that teams with a sovereign technical entity and the providers you see on this stage, that educates the decision-making authorities that are out there. ITAR is a process. It's ugly, it's cumbersome, but it is not insurmountable. And so when I talk to Ali Al-Hashimi at Yasat and other entities in the United Arab Emirates, I say, yes, but we can shape the dialogue to success. The problem is the amount of time it takes. The needs, requirements, and desires of sovereign nations are significantly less at present than what these processes sometimes take. And so in teaming with Eric's team, in teaming with members on the Hill, because at the end of the day, I'll speak personally from an Orbital ATK perspective, there are 21 satellite, no play on words, operational areas within Orbital ATK across the United States. That's a lot of political capital. And in many cases, almost all of them have to do with our solutions that we provide. And so our government relations team, your government relations team in Washington, D.C., we reach out together, and in the case of Excelis and Lockheed Martin, we did what had never been done before and has not, quite frankly, been done since. The United Arab Emirates and the United States codified a satellite cooperation agreement for remote sensing. It is the precedence by which all of the things we want to do, whether it's remote sensing or not, we can leverage.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think that's a very good description of how to tackle the issue, Abdulaziz. I think what we've found in both the defense and the space industry, more so on the defense side, is that when you have a cohesive approach with industry, with the stakeholders involved, we're able to get an audience with the Department of State and the Department of Defense and navigate through the issues. And 9 times out of 10, there is a precedent, which makes it much easier to go through the motions. When there's no precedent, in some cases where we've also had successes, that's a little more onerous, but in the cases where there are precedents, and especially with space-based technologies, which most of which have moved to from the USML list to the Commerce EAR list, I think it's a lot easier. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how to navigating, having the right support on the ground over there, pushing your case, and having US stakeholders talk to their representatives to make things happen.
And if I could just add one other thing, and this is a complexity that is a lowercase c complexity. We need to understand that nations have national imperatives and relationships beyond the scope of a US and U.A.E. relationship, or a US and Turkish, or a US or anyone's relationship. And so we need to look to leverage our international partners in their strengths and to form teams that will provide solutions. We used to call each other competitors. Then we went to competimates. When did we stop using the word teammate? And so I'll give you an example. There is an ongoing effort in this nation where our company has reached out to what would be termed as a competitor. And we have formed a cohesive team. We have maximized our synergies. We have made easier the diplomatic two-step that Talal and Ambassador Otaiba and indeed your government has to dance carefully into that good night when making down selects beyond the contextual understandings of technologies. And we need to do that. We need to look to those opportunities as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here. I know we're stretched on time, so I'm going to wrap up. I'd really like to thank the audience for spending the whole day over here. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Please join me in another round of applause for our esteemed panelists, and thank you all very much.